welcome to First Friday. I'm so excited to welcome Nicholas Hope. He says you can call him Nick. He's got a great last name, good first name too, but it's a pleasure to have you here in the Facebook group, Brain Wellness and Dementia Prevention. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's fantastic that we connected.
Yes.
We both have very similar professional interests.
Yes.
And personal interests too.
Yes.
Because we both have a personal story behind our professional passions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to introduce Nick. He is a fourth-year doctoral student at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. And his main areas of interest are in diagnosis and prevention of dementia through non-invasive pharmacological means. And he hopes to dedicate his career to helping patients and families dealing with such diagnoses, including ways of delaying and preventing dementia altogether. So he's been working with this group with, you have a MS, a Master's of Science degree in clinical psychology, and you've already been working with this group a little bit, and you decided to go back and get a doctoral degree as well.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what led you into the studies that you're in right now, for first your master's and now your doctorate.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was getting my master's degree, I coincidentally was very focused on children. That's where the majority of my training and expertise was in. And then when I went into my doctorate in 2017, that's still kind of where my interest was until getting some real world experience, as well as just starting to work with adults. And then ultimately in the summer of 2017, right before I started my doctorate, in the fall, my mother was diagnosed with a complex form of dementia. So that really kind of ignited a lot of interest in me, because I knew the stereotypical facts about, things like Alzheimer's disease and dementia, but nothing really too in depth. So really from the beginning, it sparked this massive interest. And as I progressed through my first year of my doctorate, I understood more that a lot of what she was experiencing was largely preventable to a degree. Mm-hmm. Understanding that different things done earlier on in her life could have, maybe not necessarily have prevented it altogether, given the type of dementia that she was diagnosed with, but at least pushed it back to, a later point in her life than when she was initially diagnosed. And in hindsight, knowing as much as I do now, the signs were there long before she was officially diagnosed. So that only speaks further to how really malicious this disease can be. So as I was getting towards the end of my first year, the beginning of my second, I don't remember quite when, one of my faculty members and now advisor told me about this thing called the finger study, which kind of examined different lifestyle factors that were shown to protect the brain against Alzheimer's disease. And that's really where everything started from the beginning. I read Dale Bredeson's book, which my professor referred me to. I got the audiobook and listened to it on my way to work every day. And that's really what kind of really lit that match. And that's what I ultimately decided what I wanted my dissertation to be. That's where I really focused my clinical rotations on, and that's where I'll be doing my residency next year in the field of Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah. So this is the second book. The first one's over there on the bookshelf, but just want to share with people potentially watching who might be interested that this is a phenomenal resource.
Yes.
Yeah, the book that you're talking about. Yeah. So thanks for sharing a little bit about your journey. And my journey is a little bit similar, and that my mom was diagnosed maybe, so my 21-year-old was probably 2 or 3, but just like you said, like she was probably showing signs multiple years before that. And at that time, my dad and I went to NIH to a big conference to try to find out what could we do. and experts from all around the world said exercise is pretty good. But we don't really know what else. The pharmacological studies we haven't found a home run. And, fast forward almost 2 decades later, and the science is pretty significantly different now. So we have lots of really good information of things we can do to prevent. So I'm on the same mission. So I'm thrilled that we connected. So when we first connected, I saw your post about your specific study. So can you share in more detail about what you're looking to do for your dissertation?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, my professor told me about this thing called the finger study, and this was a study that was done in Finland and was published in 2014, that over the course of 2 years, they looked at different lifestyle factors in a control group and a randomized group that received, kind of an intervention. They found that the people that had better diet, better exercise, better managed stress, more social engagement, had much better cognitive outcomes over the course of 2 years compared to the control group, which just received basic education. So they were really showing across the board that by changing these different lifestyle features for the better, we were seeing concrete results that were showing these people are doing much better, cognitively and mentally than these individuals who were not in, like I said, kind of all across the board in their memory and their processing speed and their complex thinking and all these different things. And it was really groundbreaking. They essentially developed this entire consortium internationally called the WW Fingers. That's essentially what it's called. I forget if there's an initiative at the end of it. But it's essentially this worldwide research group, and there's all of these different research projects going on all over the world based off of this finger study, and they're all examining different parts. So ultimately, my study looks at many of the factors of the finger study. So we're looking at diet, exercise, sleep, stress management, and really kind of a combination of cognitive stimulation and medical management. And one of the things that we really found interesting was that this was over the course of 2 years. We wanted to see if we would be able to elicit that behavior change in a much shorter period of time over the course of 7 weeks, because as you can understand, time is of the essence with this disease. And we really want to help people before those, traditional stereotypical symptoms of Alzheimer's disease manifest themselves. We want to address people in, their 40s and 50s, because that's what the research is showing is when the actual biological changes to the brain start to occur before, there's any outward signs. By the time that there's outward signs, there's already so much damage that's done to the brain. So we kind of want to get a head start and kind of nip things in the bud. So I'm not, crazy optimistic, and I want to be realistic here and say we're not going to change your brain functioning over the course of 7 weeks. However, we do believe that we can change the behaviors for long-term goals and help set our participants up for success in the big picture. So that's really our first goal. And the second one is really to make an argument that this type of approach is effective because, like I said, this is my dissertation. So this is a very small project in the grand scheme of things. So we would love to make a case to a large organization that has more resources, that has better funding, and really put a lot of their energy into reaching a larger group of people and seeing if we can get really widespread results in that sense. So this is what we call a pilot study, and that we just kind of want to get some initial data to, report back to the scientific community. And ultimately, again, change those behaviors that we know can protect the brain.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you.
So excited for you and excited to see how it progresses.
Thank you.
So your background is in cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's when you were talking about your 7 weeks.
Yes.
That's what you're going to be focusing on. So can you tell us a little bit about what cognitive behavioral therapy is, or you have the word motivation in front of that on the study title. So tell us about motivational CBT and CBT.
Yeah, so essentially we coined the term motivational cognitive behavior therapy based off of two kind of therapeutic techniques. So there's cognitive behavior therapy and what they call motivational interviewing. And they're two similar things, but also in a lot of senses different. So cognitive behavior therapy is a whole orientation of psychology. And it really tries to look at how our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors are all connected and how they influence one another. So a big part of CBT is very action motivated. So taking action and trying to elicit change in that way, but also understanding how the way we think affects the way we feel, and that affects the way we behave. So understanding that whole circle there. And that can involve a wide range of different techniques, like challenging different thoughts that we might have that might not necessarily be healthy or productive into more valuable ones, or changing the way that we react to things, or different ways that we cope with different behaviors, whether or not we're trying to replace an unhealthy coping mechanism with a healthier one, or an unhealthy thought process with another one. The motivational interviewing aspect comes in by essentially helping clients understand what is their driving forces and what motivates them to do the behaviors that they do. Is their health the driving force there? Is it, family? Is it some type of success? Whatever that is, helping the clients understand their own personal emotions on an individual level, and helping use those values and those motivations to apply to their goals. And kind of using that framework in order to elicit that inspiration to, actually go forward and achieve those goals in a, realistic manner. So our system is essentially trying to combine those two techniques by, one, teaching them the different coping skills and understanding of the thoughts and feelings and emotions that you need in order to, have long-term success, but also find the underlying motivations that are going to maintain that success in the long term.
Right. Thank you for giving people an understanding of what the MI, or motivational interviewing, and CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, is. My health coach training was almost entirely on motivational interviewing. So I'm probably not as skilled in it as you, but I'm familiar. I know several people who have spoken very highly of CBT as a method to, like you said, kind of change thoughts, feelings, behaviors. And it usually came along with a workbook. Are you following a workbook? Or are you creating your own thing for this pilot study?
It's a great question. So to our knowledge, off of 2.5 years of research, there is no cognitive behavior therapy manual related to our exact study. However, we are essentially taking different aspects from each week and incorporating them into a manual that we are writing ourselves. So we're essentially developing our own treatment manual to address all the different behaviors we want to. However, we're taking different aspects of various cognitive behavior therapy kind of branches, if you will. So there's a cognitive behavior therapy for diet, which I believe they call the Beck diet, that we're taking a lot of information from there on our diet week. And there's one related to what we call behavior activation, and we're doing a lot of that for the exercise week. So we're taking different aspects of various treatment manuals related to different disorders and inspiring them into our own kind of individualized manual that we're working on.
Okay.
So it's a great question.
I'm excited to see that when you're
Yes.
all done. Awesome. So if there's somebody watching who might be interested in participating in the study or learning more about it, who are you looking for to participate? How can they learn more? Just share a little bit about that with us.
Absolutely. So like I said, we're really trying to recruit people that clinically are middle-aged. I never want to label anybody based off of their age, but from a clinical perspective, between 40 and 60 years old. And we do have some requirements. So you need to be fluent in English and have access to reliable internet and a computer that is essentially Zoom compatible, since that's the system we're going to be doing in the time of COVID. You can't have any pre-existing neurodevelopmental disorders, specifically ADHD or autism. And you also can't have any severe mental health disorders or physical health issues. And we define serious mental health as a psychotic disorder such as schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, delusional disorder. And then we define major medical issues as essentially a terminal medical illness that would prevent you from completing the study or being able to participate to the fullest extent. So those are kind of like just demographic characteristics. And aside from that, we also do require all of our participants have a primary care provider. And that just ethically, we want to have a point of contact in case there is any type of adverse medical effects. It's very unlikely. We're doing very slight behavior changes, but again, just planning for the worst case scenarios. We want to have someone there to support our participants that knows them well and can give them the proper level of care if necessary.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. So I have seen the initial survey, and you asked some questions like, what's your blood pressure and what's your cholesterol level? And do you know if you carry the ApoE4 gene?
Yes.
So how are you going to use that data?
It's a great question. So first, I'd like to say that all of the data collected in that initial screening section is in an encrypted program called REDCap. So all privacy, all private information is kept completely confidential in that encrypted system. And as soon as we're done that recruitment phase, all of that data is destroyed. So that's the first thing that I like to tell people is that their information is very private, and we obviously won't give that information to anybody outside of the study. But essentially that survey that we're having participants filled out is actually a copy of what is called the CADE Dementia Risk Scale. And this was used in the finger study, which is what which is why we essentially decided to use a screener. And it assesses for different aspects that might lead someone to be at an increased risk of dementia. So having the ApoE4 gene, living in an active lifestyle, having a higher than average BMI. All of those things, the research is pointing to leads to an increased risk. So we really want to identify the people that are at the highest risk and help them. And then obviously, hopefully in a perfect world, we have more resources and funding and can open that up to other individuals as well. So we're trying to mirror this finger study as best as we can. And that's the measure that they ultimately use.
Okay. So that initial data that you record in the survey that people are completing, you said it would be destroyed. So that is not connected to the participant later at all?
Not at all.
Okay.
So we use that solely for recruitment. We want to find people that qualify for the study.
Okay.
And then we essentially reach out to the people that are indeed qualified, see if they're interested in taking part in the study. We go through the entire informed consent procedure with them. And then essentially enroll them in the study. And as soon as that recruitment phase is over, all of that data will be destroyed.
Okay.
And then once that happens, and individuals who are recruited for the study, they'll be given a 4-digit identification number. So when they fill out other surveys associated with the study and whatnot, they'll be tied to an ID number, not their name or anything.
Okay.
The only place that will have their identifying information is kind of this master list. We just need to keep that. That will be encrypted and kept on a locked database such as REDCap. And that's solely for emergency purposes. So in the case that we needed to contact a primary care physician, we would be able to say participant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is this is their primary care physician. Let's contact them and get them the resources that they need. So ethically, we do need to be able to keep track of our patients in some way, but only on that single encrypted file will any identifying information be available, and that's only available to me and the principal investigator of the study. So, and again, obviously none of that information will be shared with anybody else.
Okay. And is therapy done as a group? Are they going to be able to see each other in a big group Zoom call? Is that how?
So it's a great question. So it will be held over Zoom again, being in the time of COVID that we are. And essentially, participants have the option whether or not they wish to be identified or not. When would they go through their initial kind of screening session with either myself or a research assistant, we will tell them how to de-identify themselves if they don't want to be identified in the group, such as taking themselves off of the camera and just having kind of the blank, as well as how to change their name to whatever they prefer to be identified in the group. But they'll be, told if you do want to keep your identity anonymous, this is how you do it. And that's totally up to the prerogative of each individual participant.
Got it. Yes. Like my 9-year-old who does not like to be on on camera for school.
Yes, I don't blame him.
I get it. Okay. Um, so let's see, I'm going to look through my list of questions, and I was kind of scrolling through those that are watching to see if any questions came up. So none at the moment. So is there anything in addition to you called it the finger study?
Yes.
Okay. That sort of puts you in that piqued your interest into this pursuit of additional study.
Are you asking besides the finger study, is there
That was
anything?
the main one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the finger study is really kind of the groundbreaking study. However, there's so many studies going on throughout the world, particularly in the United States. There's this thing called the US Pointer Study that is looking at very similar results and has been kind of one of our point of contact. And I'm not entirely sure if they're still enrolling. I haven't been as up to date on them as I have in the past. However, they are really kind of the biggest United States-based research study going on related to the finger study. And there's a bunch of other kind of subcategories. So, I mean, these types of studies are looking at multiple lifestyle factors, which is really kind of one of the interesting things. However, there are so many studies that inspired things like the finger study that show singular things are tied to it. So there's a ton of research on how adequate sleep, protects the brain. There's a ton of studies on how proper diet protects the brain. There's very few studies out there that factor in a bunch of different lifestyle factors and show the exact same thing. Right. So there are so many different research studies out there. One of the things that I really love is the Mind Diet, which will be the protocol that we're using in this study. And that's specifically dedicated to protecting the brain against dementia. And there's a lot of great research out there. Dr. Morris and her colleagues are doing some phenomenal work. And I believe that they are in the process of doing a new study right now as well, if I remember correctly. I'm not entirely sure, but I believe so.
Okay. Yeah, you touched on something that comes up a lot in Dr. Dale Bredesen's background, which he was a researcher and a PhD and an MD and did all this stuff in the lab and would find that this one thing would help and this one thing would help.
Yeah.
But he couldn't make a dramatic impact by just testing one thing at a time, and went to the internal review board or whoever controlled the money and said, I want to test like these 36 things. And they said,
Yep.
You can't test 36 things. That's too complicated.
Yes.
And he said, but just changing one thing isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And so through a series of events, he ended up kind of just taking on patients and then noticing that there was significant change when they implemented lots of different areas. He said, it's not a shotgun approach. It's a buckshot approach. You got to make lots of impact. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what in this country, generally, we're used to taking a pill to cure our ills. And
Yes.
This is one of those areas like lots where one pill is not going to do the trick. So
exactly.
I'm really, really excited for you in the work that you're taking on, where you're really kind of looking at people's motivation and how can we move forward and look at not just taking this pill, but addressing diet and addressing stress and addressing exercise and addressing socialization. And so I'm really thrilled, and I definitely want to stay in touch and hear how this goes. Is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap it up for tonight?
I don't think so. If you do have any questions, feel free to share my contact info. I love talking about this subject. So any questions at all that come up, I'm happy to talk with anybody that's interested in learning more. And yeah, if there's anything that I can do to, help you or anybody listening about this in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out, because this is a crisis, for lack of a better word, that we have on our hands, and we need to get it under control.
Absolutely. So let's give it a little bit of a time frame in case this,
Mhm.
video lingers on YouTube for a long time.
I
What's
think
your
it's a great
time
idea.
frame?
So I would say my goal is to start this up June, like the first week of June. So I would say June 1st, 2021 is kind of my target deadline. In a perfect world, I would love that to be sooner. However, when you're recruiting people and getting all of that stuff organized, and we're trying to add another research assistant onto the project to help out. So all of those moving parts, I'd rather be more conservative than share something that I can't necessarily back up as well. So I would say conservatively and optimistically, I would estimate early June. And that's also to help some people that might have a little bit more freedom during the summer times, like some teachers or other individuals that might have more laxed hours. Because some of the people that I've already recruited kind of alluded to that as well. So we do want to make sure that we're catering to, our participants the best that we can.
Okay. Do you feel comfortable sharing your contact information? How should
Absolutely.
people get in touch with you if they're interested?
So it
Posting as
definitely
well.
email is the best form of contact for me. So I can be reached at N as in Nick, H as in Hope, 257729 at PC as in cat om.edu. So that is nh257729 at pcom.edu. I know it's a very long email address. Don't ask me how I was assigned it. That is PCOM, IT, admissions, whatever. Whoever assigned me that, I don't know what they were thinking, but that is my contact info, and I do I check that email regularly.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Nick, it was an absolute pleasure talking with you tonight. Thank you for sharing a little bit about you and a little bit more about this study. And again, we will be in touch.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, I'm happy to help any way I can as well. So I'm looking forward to talking to you soon in the future.
Yep. Take care, Nick.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.